2022 has been a bit of a weird year when it comes to camera performance on mid-range phones under rupees 25,000. So when Moto made a big deal about its new G82 having a 50 megapixel sensor with OIS, I had to test it out. Welcome to yet another one of our camera comparisons, where in this one we're going to pit the Moto G82 against the Poco X4 Pro and the Realme 9 Pro Plus in a bid to find out which one of these camera phones should you consider under rupees 25,000. Now for better context, the Poco X4 Pro is the cheapest of the lot and the Realme 9 Pro Plus is the most expensive, with the Moto G82 being somewhere in between. Well, if you don't know me yet, I'm Ershad, you're watching Track in Tech English. Let's dive right in. Now, starting with the primary cameras on these phones, what I noticed is that the Moto G82 has the narrowest attached lens on its primary camera. The focal length is much lower than what you get on the Poco and Realme, and of course, Realme has the widest focal length of the lot. What this essentially means is that you can capture more of the frame on the Realme 9 Pro Plus, and the really narrow frame on the Moto G82 is really not ideal for shooting. It crops in a little too much. Now let's talk about the detail retention of these sensors. The Realme 9 Pro Plus's 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 is just way sharper than the Poco X4 Pro's 64 megapixel unit and the Moto G82's 50 megapixel Samsung Gen1 sensor. At the 100% crop, you can clearly see that the 9 Pro Plus has a much sharper sample. Now in our HDR test, the Moto G82 offers the best control over the highlights, where you can see that it's not as blown out, the sun is not as blown out, and it brings out more details from the shadows as well. But you can clearly see a lot of noise here. The Poco X4 Pro does a really good job here as well. In fact, it has better control over the noise and retrieves more details compared to the G82. And the Realme 9 Pro Plus has a glaring lens flare around the sun, and the dark portions are just too dark. But it looks most detailed and natural of the three. Plus, it doesn't tamper with the colors, which is a good thing. Now, truth be told, it's kind of confusing and you can't really pick out one winner because all of these do multi-stack processing differently and none of them get it absolutely right either. I feel that there's a lot of scope for improvement here. Now, while the color science is okay in HDR, otherwise Realme generally has the worst color science with the most oversaturated images in these three phones. But the exposure is fantastic. And you can't deny that the picture does look good. Moto does a very good job of keeping it close to natural looking here. The reds, the blues, the greens, all of them are very well balanced. Poco's image is super contrasty and therefore robs a lot of details from the shadows. The image of the chair in the second sample further proves our observation. The chair actually looked like how Moto has captured it. Now, by the way, as a bonus, you can also see how sharp the Realme 9 Pro Plus is here compared to the other two. The fact that G82's color science is on point is further proved by pictures of people. In this picture of Sagar, our editor, you can clearly tell that the G82 has the most natural facial tone of the three. Realme is obviously oversaturated and Poco is somewhere in between. I do want to point out one other thing though. All the three phones do processing differently. Realme tends to over-sharpen slightly, Poco has a lot of noise, and Moto is of course soft. Now when it comes to portrait algorithm, it is very well tuned on the Realme 9 Pro Plus with a very good edge detection. Even the Moto is good. For some reason, Poco doesn't look as good here because you'll see how it looks better in selfies. Now, if you're forgiving of the softness issues with the Moto G82, you will actually prefer using this phone for capturing pictures of your friends and your family. Now, if you've come this far, don't forget to hit the red subscribe button and the bell icon right next to it to get notified whenever we put out an awesome new tech video, and also hit the like button and maybe even comment below for the sake of the YouTube algorithm. However, the true metal of any camera setup on any phone is actually dependent on its low light performance, and the optical image stabilization unit inside the Realme 9 Pro Plus and the Moto G82 definitely help these phones capture pictures without too much shake. But the G82's low light performance in night mode is really bad. However hard I tried, I just couldn't get a sharp image, and that's reflective of the performance in daylight as well. The Poco X4 Pro's low light samples look sharper and they have a better, more natural color output of the night sky compared to the other three. Having said all that, the exposure, noise control, and the sharpness on the Realme 9 Pro Plus is clearly in a different league of its own, making it the best camera phone for low light shots under rupees 25,000. Now moving on to the second camera, which is the ultra wide angle camera, you get an 8 megapixel unit on all the three phones, but all the three, function differently and capture different kinds of pictures too. Because when it comes to processing, the Realme 9 Pro Plus is the best of the lot, as you can see here. You get a good dynamic range performance and the detail retention is very good too. Yes, there's some noise in the shadow regions of the image, but it is not as bad as the Moto G82, which struggles to even bring out the details in the dark portion. And the Poco is just too soft, way too soft. The same observations are true for the non-HDR ultra-wide-angle sample, but in this sample you will also see how boosted the reds, the blues and the greens are in the Realme 9 Pro Plus's sample. Low-light ultra-wide-angle shots with the night mode are only possible on the Realme 9 Pro Plus, which is also again true for selfies. Now talking about selfies, if you guys have used a Moto phone before, you will know that it defaults to, for some odd reason, a pixel binned sample, which I think is not doing justice to the capability of the sensor, and therefore I shot in full res to match with the other two phones. And yet the selfie is not sharp and the facial tone is completely off too. I think if you want to shoot selfies on the Moto, use the pixel binned mode, because I feel that you will get better looking pictures then. Now Realme's natural, crisp, clean details look absolutely fantastic. Plus the facial tone is closer to real life as well. Poco would be my second favorite selfie here. Against the light, the Realme looks sharp again and does a better job of control over the highlights on the rear, but the tone matte look is a major put off. This is something that I don't really like at all. Clearly the Poco is the best of the lot here when it comes to facial tones when you're shooting against the light. Only if the background wasn't as blown out, but it's still pretty good. The G82 looks pretty average here. And the Poco X4 Pro's selfie portrait is the best too, with the cleanest edge cutout. Moto segmentation is not too bad here either, but it is not as good as the X4 Pro. Realme misses out on the edge detection in a few areas. I think that the selfies round goes to the Poco X4 Pro. When it comes to the processing of the images, the kind of portraits, selfie portraits that you can get with it, the Poco X4 Pro does look good. Unfortunately, the portraits are not as good on the primary camera, which is kind of odd. Now, all the three phones have a 2 megapixel macro camera, which I've made it abundantly clear I'm not a fan of. But the lesser evil of the three is the 2 megapixel macro camera on the Realme 9 Pro Plus. The Moto and Poco don't offer a sharp focus and are equally bad. Now, the common video recording resolution on all the three phones is 1080p 30 fps, so we will start with that first. Now, you get stabilization on Moto and Realme, but not on the Poco, which is a huge letdown. That's a huge negative point. Moto's color accuracy, stabilization and sound recording is the best of the three. Let me know what you guys think of the sound quality. I'll pan around slightly and show you guys how the blue sky looks. Let me know what you guys think of the sound quality. I'll pan around slightly. But it is definitely soft when it comes to the details, just like what we saw in the pictures. Dynamic range is good on the Moto and Poco, not so much on the Realme, where sometimes the highlights get blown out. Realme's advantage is definitely the fact that it's got sharpest details of the three when you're recording videos, and it is further elevated by the fact that you can also shoot 4K 60 FPS video with the phone. However, the OIS is either supremely ineffective or just doesn't work. I don't know which one is true, but it's extremely off-putting to actually shoot 4K videos without OIS or any kind of stabilization, so I really didn't want to use it in my time with the phone. Now, you do get 1080p 60 FPS on Moto and Realme, not on the Poco. You get stabilization on Realme, which is definitely an advantage for sure. And unlike the selfie stills, selfie video recording quality is really good on Moto. All three phones top out at 1080p 30 fps, but the Realme and Moto offer equally good details, dynamic range and sound recording. This is a 1080p 30 fps video capture on the Moto G80. Now this is a 1080p 30 fps video capture on the Poco X4 Pro. This is a 1080p 30 fps video capture on the Moto G82. Only difference would be in the way these two process colors. Now I prefer the natural look of the Realme over the Moto here, but that's just a slight bit of difference. And in comparison, if you guys are asking me for the Poco X4 Pro, it's good enough, but not as good as the Realme and the Moto, as you can tell from the footage itself. Overall, the Moto G82's primary camera is definitely not a sharp shooter, but it gets a lot of the other parameters right. For example, like I mentioned, the color science is really good. People pictures with facial tones is very good as well. Portrait shots look good too, and video recording is definitely a huge plus point on the Moto G82. In fact, even the selfie video recording quality is good. However, the other factors such as low light shots using the primary camera, the selfies, the ultra wide angle shots and the macros are something that are not up to mark on the Moto G82. Also, one of the things that really annoyed me is the fact that the primary camera has a very narrow focal length lens, which crops a little too much of the image. I feel that, there should have been a wider lens on the primary camera. Poco X4 Pro definitely does great selfies, but, human subject shots and portrait shots, while they do look okay, alright, they don't look the best. And the ultra wide angle camera has no great shakes either. The macro camera is not that good too. And of course, the video recording is something that's a bit of a letdown on the Poco X4 Pro. Low light pictures on the Poco X4 Pro offer definitely good color accuracy, but in other parameters, it is bested by the Realme 9 Pro Plus. The Realme 9 Pro Plus's camera performance when it comes to the finer details using all the lenses, which is the ultra wide, the primary, the selfie camera, and of course, even the macro is really good. And like I mentioned, the low light performance is the best under Rs 25,000. It's in a different league of its own. Of course, you pay more for the Realme 9 Pro Plus, but the difference in camera performance is something that you can absolutely test and see for yourself is much better, and that kind of price improvement gives you better image quality as well. Although yes, color accuracy could have been better, and of course OIS inside the phone, I don't know what's happening with it. Of course the Realme 9 Pro Plus would be my pick of the best among these three for sure, and the Moto G82 and the Poco X4 Pro for their price perform alright. The G82 has its own share of problems, the Poco X4 Pro has its own share of problems as well, and that is something that you have to realize and figure out if you are okay with living with the problems of the G82 or living with the problems of the Poco X4 Pro. Like I mentioned, it's been a weird year for camera smartphones in the mid-range. What do you guys think? Which phone did you like? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, this is Airshad signing off. Keep tracking and stay safe.